Hello students, this little mini lecture is going to teach you a four-step method for solving word problems. Most of my students have found this method very helpful, so let's go through it. Okay, this is a four-step method created by a man named George Paglia, who lived to be about 98 years old. And this method, so obviously this method has been around for a while, but it's not often taught. And I have really found that students who learn this method seem to grasp and get a little bit less afraid of working word problems. So let's go through the steps. I'm going to list them real quickly, and then I'm going to go through each one and tell you some things you can do at each level. So the first step is understand the problem. The second step is devise a plan to solve the problem. The third step is to carry out the plan to solve the problem. And then the fourth step is to look back at the answer and check it. Okay, so let's go through each step. All right, so step one is understand the problem. So most of the time you're going to have to read the problem a couple of times. Most students look at a word problem and they immediately kind of cringe and think that they don't understand it, so they're not even going to try. All right, but this can really help you. Read the problem at least twice. Read it as many times as you need to, basically. And then list the facts, okay? List the facts means write down what you know and what you're looking for. Each word problem has a list of things that you know and what you are looking for one item usually. What are you looking for? And when you write down the facts, there may be some facts in there that you don't need to solve the problem. That's called extraneous facts. So you kind of need to acknowledge that as well. If it's a word a problem where a sketch would help, like a geometry problem or something like that, then draw a sketch if it helps you visualize. And then this last one usually is not going to happen when you're asked to solve a problem in a math class, but in real life it could be. In real life, you might look at the information that you've gathered, and maybe that you don't have enough to really solve the problem, and you need to go find some more information. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, devise a plan to solve the problem. All right, and there's several things you can do for this. You can look at previously worked problems and examples. So if you're working through MyMathLab or Alex or some external program, a lot of times they have options. They say, help me solve this or give me a similar problem. So do that. Kind of look at similar problems, see what they did. All right. The important thing is that you need to write an equation, or sometimes you may be using a formula, or you might be using a spreadsheet even to plug numbers in, but you got to find the correct spreadsheet. So in some manner, write an equation that you're going to use to solve the problem. Okay? Look for patterns of relationships. That's always a good thing. And then look for a simple solution. Don't make the problem harder than it needs to be. If you can solve a problem in like 3 steps, do it that way. And don't question yourself. Don't think, well, that's too easy. That can't be the way to do this, because it usually is. If you can solve it in 3 steps, don't use 20 steps. All right? Sometimes making a table can help. For example, with rate, distance, time problems, making a table can really help you organize your information. All right, so that's step 2. Step 3 is carry out the plan. And all I'm going to say here is just do it. Once you've got the equation or the spreadsheet or the formula you're going to use, you plug the numbers in and just solve. And then step 4 is check the answers. All right. This first one here is pretty important. Is the answer reasonable? So let me just give you an example. Let's say that you are being asked to solve the speed of a car on the highway. and you get the answer 175 miles per hour. All right, and you might, a student who wasn't thinking about this might just leave that as the answer, but a student who is using this four-step method would say, no, that's not reasonable. A car does not go 175 miles on a highway, right? So you would want to go back and check steps 1 through 3 again and see where you went wrong, because obviously that is not the correct answer. Sometimes you can check your work directly by putting your answer back into the original equation. Sometimes there's another way to work in a problem. For example, you may have a spreadsheet they can plug numbers into that will give you an answer, but you also have a formula for working that problem. So you could try it both ways and see if they get the same answer. And then obviously, in a math class, you should always tuck that information away in the back of your brain somewhere to use later, to apply to some other problem later. All right, so there's our 4 steps. Now I'm going to go ahead and work you 2 problems. My computer's not being cooperative. I'm going to work 2 problems for you, and we're going to use that 4-step method for both of them. The first one is the following. We're going to read the problem. I'm only going to read it once, but as a student, you might want to read it several times. All right. Airport Express shuttle services providers provides service from San Antonio International Airport to downtown hotels, approximately 10 miles away. One particular shuttle makes 16 round trips per day, carrying 5 passengers per trip, and the fare each way is $18. What are the receipts from that day's operation? All right, so we know several things. We know that the airport's 10 miles away from downtown. We know that the shuttle can carry 5 passengers, that the fare is $18. And what we're looking for is how much money does that particular shuttle make in a day? Okay? So that's what we're going to write down and list here. So let's do that. All right. So we're writing down what we know. The distance from the airport to the hotels is 10 miles. Number of trips, round trips, is 16. Number of passengers per trip is 5. Fare each way is 18. Notice here, I just want to make a note that we are talking about round trips. So a round trip is going to be $36, correct? Oopsie, I can't seem to find the dollar sign. There it is. Okay, so we're going to keep in mind that we're going to be using $36 as our round trip value. Okay, which one of these pieces of information is not important? Well, obviously, this distance from the hotel does not matter because we're not talking in terms of time or distance. We're talking about number of round trips to these hotels. So that one can be immediately gotten rid of, right? And we only need these 3 pieces of information where we just said this one's going to be 36. Okay, so that's step 1. We just kind of read the problem. We came up with, we wrote down what we know and what we're looking for. All right, so let's come up with a way to solve this. Well, the total amount of money that the shuttle makes in a day is going to be the number of round trips times the number of passengers times the cost per round trip. Correct? So there's our equation or a formula that we're going to use to solve this problem. We're just going to multiply these numbers together, keeping in mind that the 18 is actually a 36. So there is our plan. Next, let's put the plan in action. So we're going to go ahead. Remember, this has got to be 36 now instead of 18. So we're going to plug the numbers in, and we get 16 times 5 times 36. That would be our total receipts for the day, and that would be $2,880. So we just did step 3. And then Step 4, the only way to really check a problem like this is to rework it. There's not like an equation you can plug the number back in this particular case. So what I recommend is walking away from the problem for a little while. Go and do something else, take your dog for a walk, watch a sitcom, something else besides math. And then come back later fresh and don't look at what you did before, but work the problem again using the 4-step method and make sure you get the same answer. Also, remember that we said another thing you can do is make sure that the answer makes sense. And just kind of looking at these numbers, the answer does make sense, right? This rounds up to 20, this is at 5, and then the 36, you could round that one down just for safety's sake. And if you multiply those numbers together, you get about this value. So the answer does seem reasonable, and we can be sure that we work the problem correctly. All right, so there's my first example. I've got another one. This one is a pay now or pay later example. And this is kind of a cool one because this is, real life kind of stuff. You walk into a computer store and you want to buy a computer. Let's say your computer died and you're desperate to get another one because you are taking a math class that you need to keep up with, right? All right, so let's say you walk into the computer store and they have a computer that's okay, that's perfect for what you want, and it costs $699. And the store owner gives you another option. He says, instead of paying that total amount, the $699 at the time you purchase it, you could buy that computer by paying $65 down and then $75 for a month for the next year or 12 months. And obviously, this second method is probably going to be more, right? The store owner's not going to give you that option unless he's going to make some money off of it. So that one's going to be more. So the question we're asked is, how much would you save by buying the computer up front instead of using that second method? All right, so let's kind of write down some stuff here. We are asked to find the amount saved, so we need to find out how much this second option would cost, right? And we know the numbers here. We know $65 down and then $75 a month. So that's what we know, and we're looking for this difference. So let's come up with a plan for doing that. All right, step 2, devise a plan. So to find the cost of the payment plan, we would multiply the monthly payment by the number of payments, and then add the down payment. In other words, 65 plus $75 times 12, if that makes sense to everyone. So that would be our second amount, and then we would just find the difference between what we get in that with that method and the $699. So that's our plan. So let's do it. Okay, so the payment plan, like we said, it would be the $65 down plus the 12 months times the $75 per month. So 60, but this would be 12 times 75, which is 900. So the whole thing would be 900 plus 65, or $965 would be the cost of the computer if you decide to go with the second option. And then again, remember that the computer, if you would have gone for the first option, was $699. So the savings would be $965 minus $699, which is $266. So you would save $266 by buying the computer up front. All right, now that's step 3. Step 4 is, make sure that it makes sense. Well, I can check this kind of by taking the amount of the computer, right, the $699, add the savings to that, and make sure that I get the amount that I calculated for the second plan. So $699 plus $266 equals 965. So again, that checks and we are good. So there's our 4 steps. All right, well, I hope that you use this method for solving word problems from now on. And, as usual, contact your instructor for any questions. Thank you very much for watching.